Erie Nua transport. The main features of all types of transport are dominated by the strength of the link with Britain. Land routes converge towards Dublin or Belfast, where large populations have grown up on the basis of local orientation towards trade with Britain. The domination of the nation by one or two large centers is a feature of imperialism. It is not a necessary consequence of national and economic development. Land transport is bedeviled by competition between road and rail, public and private sectors. The total capital tied up in transport is high. Overall utilization is low. Therefore, costs are high. This is a consequence of the uneven demand for transport. A high proportion of the business is due to tourist and immigrant traffic. The relative insolvency of the public sector is due to the fact that the cream of the bulk traffic is handled privately, while the public sector caters for holiday peak traffic and small occasional consignments of freight which inflate the manual handling of clerical costs. Some socially desirable services are of course provided, some of them free. The cost of individual passenger transport for private vehicle is higher than is seen by the operator. Having bought the car, he sees only the cost of the fuel as transportational to distance, as he has to pay the prime cost whether he travels or not. It therefore often appears cheaper to go a long journey by road rather than by rail, despite the increasing physical danger and waste of his time. The decline of public transport services in outlying areas is one of the negative factors in rural economics. Dwellers in outlying areas are forced to tie up capital in private transport rather than in any other productive investment. Thus, the viability of the depressed areas is still further reduced and the drift into emigration augmented. Further, the type of transport to which the small farmer turns is dictated by what is available on the second-hand market. This is rarely of the type suitable as a farm transport vehicle. The Land Rover type of utility vehicle capable of carrying a load of rough ground is reserved for farmers rich enough to buy them new. The growth of private car ownership in urban areas has resulted in increasingly unstable traffic conditions arising from traffic congestion. This has resulted in the disorganization of the schedules of the public transport services and has made public transport relatively unattractive. Thus increasing the further demand for more private transport, which in turn only adds to the problem. There is no need for us as a nation to repeat the costly mistakes made by other nations who have allowed unplanned development of individual transport to dominate men's lives. The Sinn Féin government would develop transport services in such a way as to reverse the trends described above, which are inevitable only if the state chooses to ignore its social responsibility. The main principle would be to provide a subsidized public transport service so that traffic would be attracted back to low fares and good services. The bulk of interurban business traffic would be created by fast, frequent rail services. There is evidence that drastic cuts in passenger rail fares are possible without subsidy. The Canadian National Railways have introduced 50% fare cuts and have observed revenue increases, with modification in track, signaling equipment, and better motive power speeds of 100 miles per hour, 160 kilometers per hour, on main lines are technically possible, with safety inapproachable on any road system. Car hire services would be associated with local rail terminals. Local bus services would connect. The subsidy necessary would decrease in proportion as local industrial areas built up, providing a business base load of interurban traffic. The interim transport subsidy would be regarded as part of the investment necessary for the development of local industry. Fares would be so low that the drift to private transport would be postponed, so that steps may be taken rationally over a lengthy period to allow private transport to develop without destroying all other amenities. Public transport in rural areas would be provided by small buses running frequently, single-manned, with low fares. Rural housing developments would be grouped in order to facilitate the provision of transport to the local town. Rural public transport would fit in better with the village-type community rather than with the isolated farmhouse. Areas in the northwest of the country whose economic life has been particularly hindered by partition will receive special attention as regards reintegration into the national transport system. The development of Derry, in conjunction with Donegal and Sligo, with Fermanagh, will make possible the provision of transport services on the substantial scale in that region, including the relaying of certain rail links as part of the fast interurban network of the future, serving major provincial cities of 100,000 or more, where there are at present only declining rural towns. City traffic problems will be tackled and the operation of private vehicles discouraged, if necessary, restricted. City development will be ordered as to avoid central congestion. Cities will be regionalized. Industrialization involving bulk traffic will, as a matter of policy, be developed, making the maximum use of rail links to mechanized local storage and distribution centers for local distribution by road. Technical developments in freight handling will be introduced. Mechanical handling, container traffic, automatic processing for information by computer, etc. The U.S. railroads are fighting a strong battle along these lines. Railroads are far from obsolete, as some economists suggest. Road developments will be made of national rather than local responsibility. The road development program will be coordinated with the work of the National Development Authority and with the Town and City Development Authority. The basic principle will be how to combine speed, safety, and accessibility with the need to keep through traffic away from the population centers so that the latter may be served by public transport and made safe for pedestrians. The provision of motorways becomes an economic proposition once the heavy bulk is kept off. The cost per mile is very sharply dependent on the maximum allowable load. It will therefore be desirable to link the major population centers by motorway at an early date. This is not in contradiction to the policy of encouraging fast interurban rail transport. There will be room for both types of service. To some extent, they complement each other. Sea transport is completely in the hands of foreign shipping companies, with the exception of some of the long-haul freight trade, which is carried by Irish Shipping Ltd. and the B&I Steam Packet Company, both state-owned. Irish Shipping spends most of its time carrying foreign freight between foreign ports, however. Even coastal traffic is under monopoly control, Coastlines Ltd. being the dominant firm. This is a privately owned British firm, which explains the abnormally high level of cross-channel freight rates. This holds for both parts of the country. It was adversely commented upon by Isles and Cuthbert in their 1957 report on the six-county economy. The harbor facilities are largely owned by foreign shipping companies which refuse to do business with anybody not playing the game their way. A Sinn Féin government would build up the share of Irish trade carried in Irish built and owned ships in an equitable 50%. This would involve building up our own cross-channel fleet, investing in port facilities abroad where necessary, and nationalizing those at home. Direct links would be established for all long-distance trade, at present going via London or Liverpool. An insurance cooperative will be initiated in collaboration with other small seafaring nations. In the 26 counties, air transport is at present in the hands of a state company. Some private carriers are licensed also. The service is adequate, profitable, and contributes substantially to the economy. Its profitability would be much greater if it were catering for the needs of the whole 32 counties. However, an unhealthy trend of looking for foreign development capital has developed. Foreign trade links by air freight centered on Shannon have begun to develop. The type of industry involved, however, has weak roots within the economy. It will be the policy of the Sinn Féin government to develop air transport, both passenger and freight, as much as possible and economically desirable, using our own financial resources and keeping control within the state. The question of the relation of the National Aircraft Factory to the national airline would arise. This would be the subject of serious study. It is possible that a mutually beneficial arrangement might be worked out whereby part at least of the aircraft used by the national airline would be produced at home. The main future of the aircraft industry will be to diversify into industrial automation equipment, as well as to develop utilitarian rather than prestige or military type aircraft for the developing nations. The economics of the national airline will not be put in jeopardy by any doctrinaire constraints as to what type of aircraft it will employ, nor will this question be considered in isolation, any more than the economics of the rest of the transport system. Nationalized transport will be expected to serve the economy first, not merely to balance its books. The possibility exists that bulk transport by inland waterways for certain commodities may again become economic, this being European experience. In the meantime, the waterways will be developed as a recreation amenity, including the Shannon Earn link.